Hello, I'm Jason Simpson, Engineering Director at Anaplan. Currently leading a project redeveloping the user experience. But in doing that, and sort of a bit before that, we embarked on a journey to transform our culture as well. A lot of the steer from that came from the very top, our CEO. When he joined the company in February 2017, he brought with him this idea that we should have a customer-first culture. It's basically just one where we value customer experience in everything that we do. At that point, I was kind of thinking, sounds like something more for salespeople or for customer service type people, and we've got departments that handle all of that. Well, how does this relate to me? And as I started to think about it more, I figured actually Agile aligns quite well with that. And that's what the topic of this talk is. So I thought I'd kick off with a quote from Sam Walton, founder of Walmart. He's no longer with us, unfortunately, but I like this one. There is only one boss, the customer, and he can fire everybody in the company from the chairman on down simply by spending his money somewhere else. This is going to guide most of this talk, this kind of idea that the customers are everything that we're doing things for. It should also be our biggest motivator, and that's where this next statement comes in. And I hope this resonates with people. The best feeling that I think you can get from your job is when people use what you create and they enjoy using it. This is something that I just find isn't commonplace enough. I think there's often quite an emphasis on, the reason I come to work every day is to use technology X or technology Y. Actually, I think this is the underlying reasons that we do what we do. So hopefully we're all familiar with the Agile values. I think, like I said before, these all relate quite nicely to customer first. And when you wrap them up in customer first, you can kind of see how they all start to have a nice guiding sort of North Star as you're going on your journey with Agile. I think if you're not guiding it with customer first, you can still end up with some anti-patterns. And I think anyone that's implemented Agile will have seen it done well, seen it done badly, and have all of the things in between. I think having a focus on the customer is one of the things that matters the most. And so I think it's missing a value. I think this worked for Anaplan because we had this kind of overarching culture that we were aiming for, where literally everybody cared about what they were delivering to the customer. But I don't think Agile calls it out specifically, that customer satisfaction is something that we need to pay attention to. And what are the trade-offs that we're going to make? And I think this one, customer satisfaction over technical innovation, is something that we should put in there. I'm not going to talk too much about that right now. I'm going to come back to that at the end. And hopefully I've convinced you that that's something that's useful to have in there. Some observations to start off with, though. Customers don't really care about how we've delivered things. They just care that the thing works. If you go to them and you say, we've used this brilliant technology or this excellent new framework, they're not that bothered. They just care that it does what they paid for. Another observation, I think engineering teams have a tendency to find more complexity where there was no need for any. I'll cover that a bit more later as well. There's a lot of churn in this industry with job turnover. I think more so than most other industries. I think average time in a job is just shy of 2 years. Why is that? I think often it's because we're not getting the motivation from serving our customers. Delivery economics is one of the biggest indicators of a good customer-first culture. What do I mean by that? How frequently are you putting software in front of customers? How frequently are you able to get feedback on those things? If that time is too long, you're likely to deliver far too much and inevitably probably deliver something that they didn't want. And secondly, when you're working to deadlines and release targets for that are several months away, I think the human brain kind of has this tendency to say, well, I've got to work on feature X until 3 months from now. How can I maximize the time there? When actually maybe what the right thing to do was to just do a 2-week sprint. Deliver something that solves 70% of the customer problem very early on. Deliver that, get the feedback on it. Maybe that's all they needed. There's several examples of where we've done this in the new UX for Anaplan, where we've still not needed to re-implement some of the things that we embarked on that customers told us were essential. And that's because they've placed other things higher priority than that. And so I'm glad that we didn't waste time delivering those things. And that's where that last point comes in. Over 45% of software created is never used. There's a huge amount of waste in this industry. Projects get cancelled. Startups live and then they die. But then there's also a lot of other factors internally in companies as they grow that contributes to this factor where either customer might reject it. That's the worst case scenario, I think. You put all this time and energy into delivering something that you feel is valuable, but you've not taken all the right measures to ensure that when it lands well and it's used prominently in the software. So to talk a little bit about the transformation journey we've taken at Anaplan. It's kind of 3 main pillars, I think. Identifying why and how there's a gap in customer first. That was kind of the first thing that we had to do. Then figure out how to start pulling your culture towards a customer first culture, whilst also going on an agile transformation journey. And then how do we evolve and expand that capability once we've got a really great customer-centric culture in place? I'm not going to talk too much about that last point today, but the first 2 is something that I'm going to cover in more detail. So why are we not putting customers first? The first reason is growth. If you work at a startup, and just to say what I've got going on here, I've got the size of the company down the bottom where the left is very small, and I've got customer first rating, how customer centric are our customers. And I've worked in companies of all sorts of sizes, from literally 3 people that we grew up to 30 or 40 to 250, 300 people, and now at Anaplan, where globally we're about 1,300, something like that. So fairly sizable organisation. When you're in a startup, it's everyone's job role to do everything. I miss these times when I was a sales guy, I was a marketing guy, I was also in HR, and I like delivering software as well as kind of this thing I did on the side. But you have to be connected with the mission when the company's so small. Otherwise, what the hell are you doing there? Surely you could just go to one of these big corporates and just exist for a bit. But when you're in a startup, you've got to do everything. And survival is dependent on it. And if you believe in your mission, you're going to do everything that you can to make sure that it's successful. Now, when companies grow and they've established that product market fit, you've found something that customers really like, they're starting to pay for it, you're in a good position. Start to leverage that. Figure out how you can expand your capabilities that keep more customers coming into the pipeline. And this ends up very kind of like a frenzy. You actually end up very siloed at this point in engineering because you cannot churn features out fast enough to deal with the demands that new customers really need. Oh, it's great that your platform does this. We also need to do these things before we're going to sign the dotted line. Because you're in this kind of hyper-growth state, you're like, yeah, sure, we'll knock that out. 2 weeks later, it'll be with you. You're still kind of customer-centric at that point because you're doing everything you can to maximize sales, but you're not directly talking to them to understand the problems. So the voice of the customer starts to disintegrate. And if you've not taken the right steps in this growth period, as you get to these kind of large organizations, talking 1,000+ people, the engineering department gets completely ignored from any kind of contact with the customer. And this is where the biggest shame starts to happen. Engineers start to figure out how to use their own time because they don't really know why I'm doing this thing. I think fundamentally, if teams are working on things to solve a problem, blindly following the things that a product owner is telling you to do isn't the right way to collaborate on getting the best solution for a customer. And all too often that ends up happening. And actually this can end up killing you as a large company if you're not careful. Because one of those guys is just around the corner coming to catch you up, the startups. I think the tech industry's got a big role to play in this as well, just in general. I'm going to talk about the job market. You mentioned recruitment people that might be here. Job descriptions all too often don't tell us what the companies do. They just say we're using technology X and technology Y. But why? Why am I doing that? So I think there's an overemphasis on these technologies that are on trend. And this kind of leads to this tech envy kind of philosophy where people are thinking, oh, well, I could go there and use this technology. I want to know why you're using it. Is it a good use of that technology or is it a bad use of that technology? What problem does it solve for the customers? And it does lead to high churn because people see this kind of greener grass where all these great things are being in use. But I think if we have more of a focus on the reasons that we're applying those technologies in job descriptions, we'll see a bit of a transformation in the industry. And then there's the other aspect, and I love this. Does anyone here read Hacker News? Yeah, I read Hacker News all the time. If you don't, you probably should. It's a great source of finding new patterns and new interesting things that are happening in the tech industry, ways of solving problems. A lot of the big contributors to that are the big corporate companies. Think Google, Facebook scale, Amazon. And they solve technical problems in really, really interesting ways, but they're also operating at scale that 90% of other companies aren't operating at. Even some of our big corporations won't need to deal with the same level of traffic as what Google are. So I think you can get a long way with just some really good, sensible best practice. Make sure you've got all of the right test automation in place, the right architectural principles, clean coding styles, deployment pipelines, all of that good stuff. It's all necessary. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm just saying use the things that we learn from the industry to solve the problems they were intended to solve if you have those problems. The next thing that can kill us is complexity. Organizational complexity. As companies grow, you have to start satisfying more compliance requirements, more audit requirements. There's tons of extra stuff that comes in just from creating a hierarchy that people are now part of. And all of this adds an overhead. It detracts from the customer experience because you're no longer able to have the time in some cases because the complexity's got so intertwangled with the way that you do software development. Everyone familiar with the term bike shedding? For bikes. So it's basically this idea that you avoid talking about the complex things because the easy things are easier to talk about. And I apply this in software when you don't want to get into the weeds of fixing this really difficult problem. So what you do is you fix all these problems around the edges. And actually what that does is it generates more complexity because it wasn't needed in the first place. So that's another thing that can contribute to this problem. I like this quote from James Allen in The Founder's Mentality. Another great video on YouTube, but also there's a book that he's written from Bain & Co. They did some analysis and they realized that growth is one of the biggest creators of complexity, but also identified that complexity is the silent killer of growth. And again, you've got to avoid complexity at all costs. Validate everything that's currently in existence. Make sure you still need that thing that was implemented 3 years ago to solve the problem that you had then. Keep reevaluating yourself and you'll keep reinventing yourself. And ultimately, spare yourself more time to focus on the things that the customer wants. Last thing is the ownership mentality. That didn't work that well on this screen, it's quite pixelated. But hopefully people have seen the IT crowd. This guy basically picks up the phone all the time and just goes, oh, what's your issue? Try to turn it off and on again. It's that kind of lack of ownership and accountability for what the real problem is. Going to the default, it's not really the right thing to do. I think we've seen a big transformation in the DevOps kind of culture that's quite prominent now, but I'd take that one step further. I think in software engineering, we need to intimately understand the customer problems. That means working with business people that are talking to customers a lot. It means working with our support teams, even though it's their job. We need to work closely with them to understand the things that we're hearing from customers. We need to establish feedback loops. Has the thing that we've put out there made a difference? Has it had the impact we expected? And really that takes a team to own that from start to finish. If you can't count on your teams to own a problem from start to finish, you've got big problems. So a few questions to ask yourselves. Are you actively engaged in the support? Do you run your software in production or does someone else do that for you? Do you dog food your work? Do you try it out? Does it work for you? If you were that customer that was getting the thing that has been put in front of you, are you happy or not? If not, do something about it. You're an owner. This is the thing that you build. Do you surrender to dependencies or do you proactively go out of your way to resolve them? Maybe it means that you've got to contribute to something else that isn't in your sort of general remit usually. And do you take responsibility for testing your application? Hopefully that's not a problem in 2019. So how do we create a customer-first culture? I think that kind of gives some background, I think, to how companies end up in this state where they're so far diverged and distanced from the customer. We've got to figure out how we get to a place where people are giving a crap about the customer. The first step is aligning the team. When I joined Anaplan, we had 6 teams, there were 7 projects, and my team was 9 people. Hopefully people can do maths. That's 1.5 people per team. They're not teams. So the first thing that you've got that I did at this point was firstly observe, how did we end up in this situation? Surely some of these things are not adding the value we expect, and certainly it's definitely creating silos, which is another thing that's just going to create organizational complexity. What is on the product roadmap? So I sat down with the product team. We had a look at these 7 projects that we had in flight. We said, which of these things is on the high priority product deliverables? We actually figured out that 4 of them weren't on the product roadmap at all. So instantly I'm thinking, how did this happen? There was one thing that we didn't have in flight that was actually the top priority thing that we could be doing, and there was 2 things that were sort of lower down the list that we did have in progress, and so we saw those 2 things through to completion. At this point, you've got to, unfortunately, kill someone's baby. People get emotionally attached to the projects that they've delivered if you're a single person that's delivering something. It happens all the time. And when someone comes in and says, either we're not doing that anymore, or I don't like this because I've not worked on this and you've done this 10,000 line code base that I don't really like it, always happens. People get very defensive. And I ended up in that situation where there was a lot of backlash. So the first action that I took was running a future perspective. I wrote on the whiteboard in our kind of boardroom in York, "We are doomed." And asked everyone to contribute all of the reasons that we're doomed due to recent decisions that have been made to cancel projects, make some teams. We ended up with 2 teams at the end of this. Shortly after, I did a third. And you can kind of see on here, the top left there, we've got the "We Are Doomed" retro. Did happen, I promise. You can kind of see the unclear process and direction was the most upvoted topic. None of these things were killer things. We weren't doomed. We were fine. And actually, we had the highest priority things now in progress with our teams. And so we could be proud of the things that we're delivering. I think bringing people together to sort of realize that was one of the first steps on this journey. There was a couple of other sessions that I ran around, okay guys, we're going to come up with a mission together. You guys are going to define the mission of this team. Within these boundaries, these are the things that we've got to deliver. And then we had a working agreement. Because a lot of the process stuff was unclear, a lot of it was, I don't know if we can work with each other that well. So the working agreement kind of established some baseline rules that helped the team be accountable to each other for certain things. And down here we've got a quote. So a few weeks after all of this madness happened, I ran a planning session with the whole team where we had a look at the next project that we were going to deliver. This was the number 1 priority thing. I got them actively engaged in coming up with architectural ideas for how we'd deliver it, what code changes we'd need to make, what impact that would have on the customers, writing the stories, breaking them down. And I got this really nice message from one of the engineers afterwards. Really good session before. That's the first time I've sat down and talked out a design in all the time I've been here. I couldn't believe that. Usually it was architects and JIRA tickets that just prescriptively said, you're going to deliver these things exactly like this. It was a bit of a shock for me. It wasn't normal to me that was the case, but apparently that was the case. And I'm proud that we were able to bring people in to actually define how we took that particular project forward. Next thing to do is hire the right people. We're only 9 people. We're now at 35 in my team, but contributing to the project that I'm leading, there's 44 globally. So a substantial growth period from the 9 that we started out with. But you've got to hire the right people with the right mindset. One of the first things that I'll ask people in an interview is, tell me a project that you're most proud about. And generally at this point, because of aforementioned job market problems, you hear people say, I delivered this with technology X and technology Y, and we delivered it early and it was great. Cool. But why did you do that thing? What impact did it have when you shipped it? They're the things that we need to be proud of. And you'd be surprised how infrequently people can actually articulate the customer impact that the things that they worked on had. It's a picture of our team 2 years ago, so actually middle of last year, and then here's a picture of us at the start of this year. Doesn't that look like the right talent? I think it does. Talked earlier about implementing best practice. None of this stuff that I'm saying about blindly follow all the customers, I'm not saying blindly follow all the customers. Find all the problems first, but it should not withstand doing best practice implementations. We should always be trying to write good tests, have a good pipeline, automated deployment, all of those great things, building quality into the product that you're delivering. None of those things should be sacrificed at all, ever. And actually, they're the things that allow you to deliver things more quickly, more sustainably, and safer in the future. This is one thing that you shouldn't sacrifice. Every story, task, or change request should be backed up with why. And it's one of the first questions that all of my teams ask in a sprint planning or a backlog refinement session is, why are we doing this? What is the problem that we're solving? Let's root cause it. And over time, the stories are now shaped in a way that are easy to connect with on that level. So you kind of naturally get in that customer connection before you start, and you can collaborate on the solutions. You can figure out how you break down those stories. Empower people to do the right thing for the customers. I'll tell a little story about myself actually. About 7 years ago, I was on a Virgin holiday in California. I was doing a tour around. I was in my last destination, which was Los Angeles. I was in my hotel there. We had some issues with the hotel, some cleanliness problems. I'm not going to go too much into the detail because it's not worth doing. I had some complaints. Also, there was some other things that weren't quite right about the hotel. We were told we'd be in downtown Los Angeles. We were in Anaheim, which is, anyone that's been there, it's actually quite a distance. We were driving for an hour each day to get into some of the sites that we wanted to see. So I sent an email to the Virgin Holidays general customer service email address. This was the night before we flew. The next day I turned up at the check-in desk and checked in, gave my passports to the person behind the check-in desk. And the first thing they said to me, oh, Jason Simpson, we needed to speak to you. It's like, really? Okay. Yeah, we've got one of my colleagues who wants to ensure that you have a really smooth journey through the airport. So we got fast-tracked through security. We got taken to a first-class lounge where the rep spoke to us about our experience. What were the problems that you were seeing? How can we make this right? You know, they'd already done a lot at that point. Incredible story. What a human thing to do. I've emailed this general email address the night before. The next day, somehow communication has been so good in that organization that someone's waiting for me at the check-in desk. It's unbelievable customer service, and they really showed up. And I think this has to do with empowering people to do the right thing for the customer. If you do that changed my experience as well. I went from someone that was never going to book a Virgin holiday again to someone that is going to book Virgin holidays as often as I possibly can, because they give a crap about the experience that I have. I know that they put a lot of energy into it. I think the same is true of software. I'll cover a slide on this a bit later on. Engineers as salespeople, we get into engineering probably because we're not very good at sales as well. But it's an important skill. How do we justify the things that we're working on in business terms? Do we need to solve some technical debt because we fancy solving the technical debt, but what's the knock-on effects that has to the business? It's much easier to convince a product organization or your boss or whoever that this is worth doing if you're able to talk in business terms. Usually that's not necessary because we have a pretty good understanding of technical debt. But articulating it in monetary terms, the impact it's going to have to the customer, is a really valuable skill that cannot be understated. And this last point, follow-up. If you say you're going to do something, go and do it. I think if you can have this culture internally as well, you'll create one of the best work environments you'll ever work in. If I say to you, I'm going to go and do something, but I use language like this, I'll try and do that tomorrow. Maybe I'll do that next week. Happens all the time. I'll do my best. It's non-committal language. And I've forgotten about it the moment I've left that conversation if I use language like that. But the other person doesn't know that. They think you're going to go and do it. And they don't know you're not going to go and do it until several weeks later when they say to you, did you do that thing that I asked you to do? And you say, oh no. Where's the trust gone then? It's completely lost in the organization. So I make a point of only committing to things that I can do. I manage a pretty wild backlog of work for myself. To ensure that I do follow up at some point, I can set some expectations around when I'll get around to doing things. And if I'm not going to do it, I can see it there in my backlog of work that I need to follow up with that person, even if just to say I'm not going to get to that thing until next week. It creates a really, really good feeling. If you're going to do that with your internal employees, and then they do it with their customers, or you do it with the customers as well, you'll have better customer satisfaction scores as a result. It's a really important one. So, lastly, this first point I made about customer satisfaction over technical innovation being a missing agile value. I'm not saying that we shouldn't innovate. I'm saying the innovations we do should be inherently valuable to customers. If they're not, you probably didn't need to do it. And adding extra complexity for the sake of it isn't the right reason to do it. Architectures, frameworks, libraries, languages, they're not goals of a project. We don't start on a project because we get to use these things. We start on the project because there's something we've got to deliver for the customer. These are tools which can be applied to the problems that you're solving. That's a really important one as well. Customer satisfaction, it feels good to make customers happy. I think it's the most important employee motivator. If you've got a workforce that is motivated by solving problems for the customers, and you're able to create an environment where they can go and do those things, great things happen. Good question to ask yourself throughout the journey. Would you use the thing that you created to solve the problem that you're solving? Talked about dog fooding before. Your customer may not always be obvious. If you're not serving the customer, your job is to be serving someone who is. So everything that you do has a ripple effect. You might be an IT department, so you're never going to talk to a customer, but actually you are, because your internal colleagues are your customer. And you enabling them enables them to go and do better things for their customer. Everything that you do has a ripple effect. And actually the deeper you are in these things, the broader the impact you can have on enabling the people that need to service customers to do a good job of that. So in technology we have this a lot, where there's a lot of API-based teams that don't necessarily deliver something that a customer sees, but they deliver things that customers interact with. At that point, the other teams are your customer, but then their customer is also important because they care about performance metrics and things like that. A few quotes, a few things that we've had from literally the last few weeks actually. We first got to production back in December last year. We've been shipping software several times a week since then. And that's the first time in Anaplan's history we've been able to do that. So it has been quite the transformation on a technology level as well. These are some of the things we got from people when we're saying, we've just delivered this new thing to you. People are flabbergasted. Whoa, look at the rate of change that you're bringing and the great stuff that you're doing. The rate in which you are making changes to the platform over the last 2 months has been outstanding. And it feels so great to get this kind of feedback. Here down the bottom, we've just released a new product. You can see the amount of people that were already kind of excited by what we've done. Again, everyone's in this together. We're all trying to create a customer journey. Now, my closing thoughts are that the customer experience does matter. My metaphor here is apparently something that looks quite tasty. That's the feedback I gave. I can believe it. But it's not supposed to look great. Imagine you're a waiter, you get the best customer service from that waiter in the restaurant. You order yourself a cooked breakfast, and this is what shows up on the table. The software is the thing that shows up on the table. And if it looks like this, you could have the best customer service people in the world, but the customer experience has been fundamentally damaged at this point they're never going to believe that you're going to turn this around into something that you want to see when you've paid money for this meal. Hopefully you can see the comparison there with software. When people are selling things, you've got a big army of salespeople selling your software to customers. The things that you put in front of them are fundamentally what they have to see the value in. And so the customer experience is crucial to engineering. And that's me. Thank you.